Okay, so last week I told you about the diet pill, the doctor, the referral I walked out with very smugly, and the night I went down a research rabbit hole and my entire life made sense. And if that episode landed for you, if you listened and thought, oh, that's me, then this episode is what comes next. If you haven't listened, have a listen to that one first. It's under 15 minutes. Because that moment of recognition is one thing, but when you close the tab and you're sitting there going, okay, now what? Where do I actually start? Who do I call? How much is this going to cost? How long is this going to take? What if they don't believe me? That's this episode. I'm going to walk you through the entire assessment process in Australia, what it actually looks like, what it costs and how long it takes, and what happens after. No vague, speak to a professional advice. Actual steps, actual numbers, actual things to say. This is Anyway, I Have ADHD, a podcast by NeuroSpice Nation. I'm Han, late diagnosed ADHD, mum of 2, founder of NeuroSpice Nation, and a person who genuinely cannot believe it took 31 years for someone to notice. This podcast exists because when I got diagnosed, I went looking for something warm and funny and actually useful, and I couldn't find it. So here we are. Anyway, I Have ADHD is a podcast for late diagnosed adults and everyone navigating that chaotic, confusing, weirdly emotional period that comes after you finally get some answers. Every week we take a different corner of ADHD life, the science, the mess, the stuff nobody warned you about, and talk about it honestly. No judgment, no lectures, no 12-step systems, just real stories, actual useful stuff, and the hope that someone listening feels a little less alone. Today we're talking about the assessment process, specifically in Australia, specifically as an adult, and specifically from the perspective of someone who has been through it and came out the other side with a diagnosis, a prescription, and a lot of feelings. Let's go. So, after my doctor handed me that referral, I did what any newly suspicious, late diagnosed ADHDer does. I Googled everything. I took every online quiz, I read every Reddit thread, I watched every TikTok, and by about 3 a.m. I was absolutely convinced. But then morning came, and the second guessing and self-doubt kicked in hard. What if I'm wrong? What if I'm just looking for an excuse? What if I walk in there and they look at me and go, you seem completely fine. What are you doing here? I've spent my whole life being told I'm dramatic. What if they were right? What if this is just more of that? I think that second guessing is really common, especially for women, especially for late diagnosed adults who have spent decades being told they're fine, they're just lazy, they just need to try harder. But here's what I want you to know before we get into the process. You are not looking for an excuse. You are looking for information and you deserve to have it. So, my GP referred me to a specific psychiatrist, which if you're lucky is exactly what will happen to you. Your GP knows someone, gives you a name, and you book directly. My psychiatrist was 100% telehealth. No waiting room, no driving anywhere, just a video call from this very room I'm sitting in now. My own house, which honestly was the best possible setup for someone whose brain doesn't love unexpected sensory environments. But after my first session, my psychiatrist did something I didn't expect. He called my mum. Because here's the thing about adult ADHD assessments. They want childhood history. They want to know what you were like as a kid, what school was like, whether teachers ever flagged anything, whether you were always like this or whether something has changed. I'd said they're trying to answer questions about my childhood and honestly, I couldn't give him much. And my memory, as we've established, is not exactly reliable. Turns out that's also an ADHD thing. Shocking. So he asked if there was someone from my childhood he could speak to directly. And my mum, thank goodness, was able to fill in those gaps. Turns out I was exactly like this as a kid. Always had been. The assessment just made it official. And that's actually a really important part of the process. Not just the, yes, you have ADHD part, but the, you've always been like this and it was never your fault part. That hit harder than I expected. All right, let's get practical. Here's the Australian adult ADHD assessment process step by step. Step 1. Do 2 things before your GP appointment. First, take the WHO Adult ADHD Self-Report Scale. It's called the ASRS. It's free. It's online, it's clinically validated, and it's not a diagnosis, but it gives you something concrete to bring to your appointment. I'll link it in the show notes. But if you don't do this before, don't stress. Your GP will have you do one. Second, write down your symptoms and how they actually affect your daily life. Not just I'm disorganized, specific examples. Work things, relationship things, financial things, daily functioning things. Here's what I mean. Not I struggle with admin, but I missed 3 bill payments in the last 6 months because I forgot they existed. Not I have trouble focusing at work, but I spent 4 hours yesterday doing everything except one urgent thing I needed to do, and I still don't know where the time went. Not I'm always late, but I was late to my own child's school concert because I got distracted getting ready and lost 20 minutes I cannot account for. Not I'm forgetful, but I have restarted the same load of washing 4 times this week because I keep forgetting it's in the machine. Not I have trouble sleeping, but I lie awake at 2 a.m. replaying a conversation from 2011 and cannot make my brain stop. The more specific you are, the more useful the picture. Your doctor needs to understand how this actually shows up in your life, not the clinical version of it, the real version. And if you can, dig out old school reports. Anything from childhood that mentions you were distracted, not reaching your potential, so bright but ... That kind of language, gold in an assessment. And if you can't remember your childhood because your memory is also unreliable, call your mum. Genuinely, mine helped me more than I expected. Step 2. Your GP is your starting point. In Australia, you need a GP referral to access Medicare rebates for specialist appointments. Without it, you're paying significantly more out of pocket. Here's the script. Write it down again if you need to. I think I might have ADHD. I've been looking into the symptoms and a lot of them resonate with me. I'd like a referral for an assessment. That's it. You don't need to perform it. You don't need to prove it. You just need to say it. Remember, I gave you that last episode. When you get the referral, make sure it specifies MBS item 291. That's the Medicare item number for a comprehensive psychiatric assessment. With a GP referral under item 291, you get a Medicare rebate of around $255 on your initial consultation. Without a GP referral, that drops to around $89. Same appointment, very different bill. Always get the referral first. Now, something worth knowing that could genuinely change your experience of this process? GP reforms are actively rolling out across Australia right now. In February this year, both New South Wales and Victoria announced reforms allowing trained GPs to diagnose and treat ADHD directly, joining Queensland, South Australia and Western Australia who are already moving in this direction. The rollout is staged, so it depends where you are and who your GP is. In New South Wales, Stage 1 reforms have been active since September 2025. Allowing trained GPs to continue prescribing medication that a psychiatrist originally initiated. And Stage 2, which allows trained GPs to independently diagnose ADHD without a prior psychiatric assessment, is expected mid to late 2026. In South Australia, GPs can already access additional training to diagnose ADHD and prescribe medication to adults without needing a specialist appointment. This is genuinely significant. It means for a lot of people the process is getting shorter and cheaper. Ask your GP where things are at in your state. Not every GP will be across it yet, but it's worth the conversation. And remember, if your GP dismisses you, if they say you seem fine, or everyone struggles with focus, or you don't look like you have ADHD, ask for a second opinion. You are allowed to do that. You do not have to accept a dismissal from the first doctor you see. Step 3. Finding your specialist. Once you have your referral, you need to find a specialist. There are 2 types and the difference matters. A psychiatrist can both diagnose ADHD and prescribe medication. A psychologist can diagnose but cannot prescribe. And here's the important bit. If you're diagnosed by a psychologist and you want to explore medication, you can't take that report from your GP and get a prescription. You'll need to see a psychiatrist to initiate medication. Your GP cannot start you on ADHD medication for the first time based on a psychologist's diagnosis alone. So if there's a chance you'll want to explore medication, and we'll do a whole episode on that next week, going straight to the psychiatrist is probably your most efficient and cost-effective path. One process, one specialist, one outcome. Now, wait times. I'm not going to sugarcoat this. For a private in-person psychiatrist, you're looking at 2 to 6 months in most areas. For public mental health services, the wait can be 4 to 6 months or longer, but the cost is significantly lower and in some cases bulk billed. For telehealth specialists, the wait is generally 2 to 8 weeks, much faster. My assessment was entirely telehealth. Same clinical standards, same Medicare rebates, significantly less waiting. If you're in a regional area especially, telehealth removes the barrier of geography entirely. It's worth considering. Step 4, the actual assessment. So what happens when you get there? The assessment is a conversation, a structured one, but a conversation. Your specialist will ask you about your symptoms, when they started, how long they've been happening, and how they show up across different areas of your life. Work, relationships, daily functioning, finances, sleep. They'll use standardized questionnaires, and you'll probably come across 2 in particular, the ASRS and the CAARS. The ASRS stands for the Adult ADHD Self-Report Scale. It was developed in collaboration between the World Health Organization and researchers at Harvard Medical School, which is why you'll sometimes hear it called the WHO ASRS. It's an 18-question self-report questionnaire, meaning you fill it out yourself, and it covers 2 main areas, inattentiveness and hyperactivity and impulsivity. It's also the one you can take online before your assessment, which is why I recommend doing it before you even walk in the door. Link in the show notes. The CAARS stands for the Conners Adult ADHD Rating Scale, named after the researcher who developed it. It's a longer scale designed to assess ADHD symptoms in adults across multiple areas, including inattention, memory problems, hyperactivity, restlessness, impulsivity, and problems of self-concept. And here's the interesting bit. There are both self-report and observer versions, meaning someone close to you, a partner or a family member or a close friend, can also fill it out about you, which is part of why my psychiatrist called my mum. He wanted the outside perspective. Neither of these is a test you can pass or fail. They're not looking for the right answers. They are building a picture of how your brain actually works, and the more honest you are, the more accurate that picture is. They'll also want to know childhood history, and here's something worth knowing, and I didn't know this until I went through the process myself. The way ADHD is diagnosed follows something called the DSM-5. That stands for the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th edition. It's basically the Bible of mental health diagnosis, a standardized reference guide that clinicians use to determine whether someone meets the criteria for a specific condition. In Australia, we follow the DSM-5 alongside international guidelines, and it's what your psychiatrist or psychologist will be working from when they assess you. And one of the DSM-5 criteria for ADHD is this: symptoms must have been present before age 12. This doesn't mean you had to be diagnosed as a child. Clearly plenty of us weren't, especially women. But it means your clinician needs to find evidence that this has been there since childhood, even if nobody picked it up at the time. Even if an adult is only diagnosed now, there should be retrospective evidence from school, home, life, earlier behaviour that some of the symptoms were present in childhood. This is why old school reports are so useful, so bright but easily distracted, struggles to stay on task, could do better if she applied herself. That's your evidence right there. And if your memory of childhood is patchy, very on brand for ADHD, this is exactly why having a parent or sibling who can speak to what you were like as a kid is genuinely helpful. It's not just a nice to have, it's part of building the clinical picture. And they'll be ruling out other things that can look like ADHD: anxiety, depression, thyroid issues, sleep disorders, trauma. This isn't them doubting you, it's them being thorough, because those things can present similarly. But here's the thing they might not tell you up front: they also very commonly coexist with ADHD. The research on this is genuinely wild. Over half of adults with ADHD, 51%, also have an anxiety disorder, making it the most common comorbidity. And nearly half, 48.8%, experience mood disorders include a major depressive disorder. Insomnia disorders are found in over 44% of adults with ADHD. Depression is nearly 3 times as common in adults with ADHD, and it's estimated that 44% of people with ADHD will have a depressive episode before the age of 30. I'm in those statistics. I struggled with anxiety for most of the decades leading up to my diagnosis, and after my first child was born, I had really bad postnatal depression. At the time, nobody connected any of it to ADHD. In hindsight, it makes complete sense. An undiagnosed brain under enormous pressure, no framework for understanding why everything felt so hard, and a nervous system that was already running on empty. Of course it showed up as anxiety. Of course it showed up as depression. Of course it gets worse when I had a baby and the demands on me tripled overnight. So when your clinician is asking about anxiety or sleep or low mood, they're not looking for a reason to dismiss the ADHD. They're trying to understand the full picture. Because a lot of us aren't just dealing with ADHD, we're dealing with ADHD plus everything that came from spending years undiagnosed, exhausted, and being told we were just needing to try harder. The more honest you are about all of it, the better the support you can get on the other side. The assessment usually takes 1 to 3 sessions. Each session is around 45 to 90 minutes. Be honest, the whole way through. This is not a performance. You are not trying to convince anyone of anything. You are providing information so they can help you accurately. Step 5, the outcomes. There are 3 possible outcomes from an assessment. 1, ADHD confirmed. You get a diagnosis, a written report, and a treatment plan. This gets sent to your GP, who then coordinates your ongoing care. This is what happened to me. 2, ADHD not confirmed. This doesn't mean nothing is wrong. It means ADHD specifically isn't the answer. But you've still had a thorough assessment and you'll have more information on what is going on. That's still genuinely useful. 3, more information needed. Sometimes they want another session, more history, collateral from someone who knew you as a kid. This is normal. It doesn't mean they're dismissing you, it means they're being careful. Now let's talk about the cost reality. I want to be really honest with you about this because I think the vagueness around cost is one of the things that stops people starting the process. Research from the University of Wollongong published in 2026 found that the average total cost of an adult ADHD assessment in Australia is nearly $1,400, and in some cases it reaches closer to $4,000. That is a genuine barrier. It is not okay that it is, and I want to acknowledge that for a lot of people, this is the thing that makes the whole process feel impossible. I was assessed in mid-2023. My first session was 45 minutes and cost $600. I got a Medicare rebate of $237.45. So my out-of-pocket was just under $363. Then I had to do a follow-up, which was 30 minutes and $300 with $121.40 rebate. So in total, I paid just over $600 out of pocket for the full assessment across 2 sessions. And then when my medication wasn't sitting right, I had another appointment to work through that, another $200. So realistically, it was closer to $800 all up before I even got a prescription that actually worked, which is not nothing. but it's also not the $1,400 average the research talks about. So shop around, ask for a fee schedule up front, and don't assume every provider charges the same. They really don't. If cost is a barrier, it's worth knowing that telehealth isn't necessarily cheaper than seeing someone in person. The Medicare rebates are the same, and some online clinics have actually increased their prices to meet demand. What telehealth does offer is significantly shorter wait times, weeks instead of months, which means you get answers faster even if the price tag is similar. The options that genuinely reduce cost are the public pathway, longer wait times but significantly lower fees and sometimes bulk billed, and the new GP reform pathway if your state has it, which tends to be cheaper than seeing a psychiatrist. Ask your GP what's available in your state right now. And it's worth checking your private health insurance too. Some policies cover part of the assessment cost. It varies enormously by policy, so call them and ask directly before you assume it's not covered. One more thing, and this saved me a significant amount of time, money, and headaches long term. Once you're diagnosed and you've found a medication that works for you, we'll cover the different meds next episode, you don't have to keep going back to your psychiatrist for every repeat prescription. Your psychiatrist can write to your GP and give them a permission to prescribe your medication directly. It's called a shared care or delegation arrangement. Once you're diagnosed and stable on medication, ask your psychiatrist about a shared care arrangement, where they write to your GP and give them permission to handle your repeat prescriptions. This can make the ongoing management significantly cheaper because GP appointments cost less than psychiatrist appointments. But, and this is important, it's not as simple as it sounds, and the rules vary depending on which state you're in. Your GP needs to apply for what's called a Schedule 8 permit to prescribe ADHD stimulant medication. ADHD medications are Schedule 8 controlled substances, which means most GPs need a permit before they can prescribe them. Not every GP will want to do this. Some aren't comfortable with the additional paperwork and regulatory requirements that come with Schedule 8 prescribing. And the appointments generally need to be in person. Your GP needs to physically see you each time they're writing the repeat script. This isn't a phone call situation. The rules also vary state by state. The co-prescribing GP must refer you back to your original specialist for a review at least every 2 years, and some states have additional requirements on top of that. So it's worth asking a psychiatrist about this option, but also worth having a conversation with the GP first to check that they're willing and set up to do it. Don't assume, ask both of them. The system is not perfectly set up for this. The wait times are real. The costs are real. The emotional labor of advocating for yourself when you've spent your whole life being dismissed is also very, very real. But you deserve to know what's going on in your brain. And the process starts with one appointment. Here's your one thing for this week. Before your GP appointment, do 2 things. Take the WHO ASRS online, link is in the show notes, and write down 3 specific ways your symptoms are affecting your daily life right now. Walk in with those 2 things and you will walk in prepared. The rest of it, you'll figure it out as you go. That's kind of the whole ADHD experience. Before I go, next week we're talking medication, and I know that word makes some people nervous. Whether you're freshly diagnosed and staring down at a prescription you're not sure about, or you've been avoiding the conversation with your doctor entirely, or you just want to understand what the options actually are before you decide anything, that episode is for you. We're going to cover what the different medications actually are, how they work, what the side effects look like, and what the trial and error process is really like, because nobody tells you about that part. Next Wednesday, see you there. Anyway, I have ADHD. And if you do too, or you think you might, you're in exactly the right place. New episodes every Wednesday. Follow the show so you don't forget. And if you do, same. I get it. Come find me on Instagram and TikTok at NeuroSpice Nation. Send me a DM. Tell me your diagnosis story. I genuinely want to hear it. Details on how to reach out are in the show notes. And if today's episode resonated, a rating or review means more than you know. It helps other spicy brains find the show. See you next week.